Binge the full week of The Ray Taylor Show ad-free over at inspireddisorder.com/plus.
This is The Ray Taylor Show.
Welcome to The Ray Taylor Show, where I bring you the reviews on the latest movies and TV shows, as well as classic and foreign films. I'm your host, Ray Taylor, and on this podcast, I'll be talking about all things movies and television. Whether you're looking for a new movie to binge or want to know if that blockbuster is worth the trip to the theater, or just want to hear my opinions on a classic or foreign film, I've got you covered. So join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for new episodes, and let's dive into the world of film and television together. On this episode, I am talking about the Indian film from 2006, Rang de Basanti, Rang de Basanti. It's a movie directed by Rakeysh Omprakash Mehra, written by Renzil de Silva and Sharman Joshi, and Rakeysh Omprakash. The stars, Aamir Khan. Huge fan of his. That was one of the main reasons I watched this movie. It was on my to-do list or my watch list. Also, Soha Ali Khan, as well as Siddharth, and Sharman Joshi, which turns out is another actor from. So two of these actors, Aamir Khan and Sharman Joshi, both from one of my favorite films of all time, Three Idiots, a movie that was filmed a few years after this. I think this was 2006, I believe. Three Idiots was 2009, a movie that I saw for the first time last year and instantly fell in love with. I've watched a bunch of Aamir Khan's films at this point. Anytime he shows up, I see that he's in a film, I will watch it. I enjoy the roles he takes. I enjoy the films he's in. And, one of the main reasons I watch this is the overall idea of this movie. College student in India, an Indian film, college students in India film a documentary about Indian freedom fighters fighting against English imperialism. The goal is to complete this passion project, but then it turns into something much bigger. This is a movie. At first, I just like this movie. At first, I enjoyed this movie about the struggle to make a movie with no support. Right, you have this lead actress this white girl from London wants to make this documentary. People that she pitches this idea to are people, they don't want to do it. They don't like the story. It's not a well-known enough story for them to want to invest money in it. But she's like, goes to India anyway, meets up with her contact in India, and they're going to put this documentary together themselves, and cast it and put it together. Right, so this movie, in a lot of what I thought this movie was going to be, was this movie about a person fulfilling a passion project to complete this film despite nobody wanting to help them, and to use inexperienced actors for the reenactment stuff. And this movie became so much more than that, right? It's a movie that when it does become something much bigger, I loved this movie. So at first I was just like, okay, this is interesting. Where I thought it would go, like, okay, this will be cool. I like that kind of a story. But then it becomes something much different later on in this film. And even though it is almost a 3-hour long film, 100% justifies its runtime. Like, this movie takes its time to really set up all the characters. And so when that change does happen, it is so much more impactful, I would say, than if it had just been rushed into where this thing goes to the next level. But where this movie ends is so far removed in a lot of ways from how this movie starts, but also in many ways is almost exactly the same as how this movie starts. It's just so good. It really, as I said, justifies the runtime. Just another great movie from Aamir Khan, as well as Sharman Joshi, who I enjoyed in this film. This movie, the reason why I wanted to watch this movie, it checked a lot of boxes, right? Had Aamir Khan in it. It's available on Netflix. The description of the movie sounded interesting on Netflix. An idealistic English filmmaker casts a group of student actors in her docudrama about India's revolution against British rule in the 1920s. Right? All those things, rebellion, movie about making a movie, starring actors I like, easily accessible on Netflix. Check, check, check. I'm in on this movie, right? The picture of these kids on the image for Netflix, right? A picture of a bunch of dudes just kind of jumping for joy. Looked cheesy, but, I was still in, right? Still in. I love the two actors from Three Idiots. The white chick from London has kind of a Cameron Diaz quality to her, which I enjoyed. This being 2006, definitely kind of had a 90s vibe to it, early 2000s vibe to it. Obviously, it definitely was a product of its time, for sure. And when we first meet Aamir Khan and Sharman Joshi's characters, right, after she goes to India, she meets with her contact and kind of struggling. There's a fun montage of her seeing a bunch of people kind of auditioning to be in this thing, and then just going to go hang out with her and her friends. We're introduced to DJ and Suki, right? Aamir Khan and Sharman Joshi's character. And when you first meet them, they are very much like a Bud and Doyle type of characters, like in Biodome, right? They are partiers. They are basically, you meet both of these guys chugging beers, leaning back over a cliff, right, with water on the bottom, and just leaning over the back of the cliff, drinking beer, right, chugging beer, right? Fun. The vibe of this movie is very kind of a cheesy 90s kind of like fast cuts, stylized things. It's not like it's a very light and fun and kind of cheesy type of a movie at first, right? And when we meet these two actors, and the fact that they made me feel like Bud and Doyle from Biodome, I'm like, okay, this is interesting. This is funny. This is like cheesy, but I'm in, right? We also find out later DJ graduated 5 years ago, but he still likes hanging out with these people because, they mean something to him. So it also has kind of a Van Wilder type of a feel to it. But as this movie starts, there's some negatives, right? There's some things that I'm having to overlook. The documentarian, like just the fact that she, before going to India, before pitching this idea to the people, I guess, that were going to produce it, she was working on this thing for 2 years, right? She even learned Hindi, right? All before ever bringing this idea up to anybody, right? So she had already been 2 years in. She'd already started learning Hindi, and you would have thought that within those 2 years, she would have at least floated the idea by people and before doing all this work and all this preparation. But okay, I'll look over that. The beginning also, some kind of bad acting, especially with the chick, the Cameron Diaz chick, especially with the English-speaking actors. Kind of bad acting, but also like the dialogue in many of the scenes early on. Like a lot of my criticisms are from the beginning of this movie. There is a funny scene where she calls one of the producers or a teacher or whatever a bitch in Hindi, which I can imagine a theater erupting in laughter when that happened, right? But as far as the dialogue, Like, they're all speaking English. Their mouths are moving. The words are the words that they're saying, but everything sounds like it's dubbed. Like, they recorded all of the dialogue after filming, and like, it's just ADR and not very. It just doesn't. It just seems cheesy, right? Seems cheesy, seems kind of low end, right? So I'm kind of overlooking some of these things. There's moments where, like, her idea for this documentary is based on her grandfather's diary that she found, who he worked at a prison where these revolutionary guys were being held and later executed. And whenever it, like, flashes back to that, there's this melodramatic vibe going on with the score and the way it's shot. These flashback scenes are shot, and the voiceover and all of these things, very, like, cheesy, melodramatic thing. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm overlooking that. I want to see where this movie goes, right? And it's just the beginning as everything's going, right? Also, this movie has so many Dutch angles. It is like almost painful to watch. How many times the camera is almost at like a 45-degree angle, like constantly. Like, it is almost never not at a 45-degree angle. Dutch angles all over the place, right? This movie and, like, the friend group is very much has the kind of 90s, like, extreme. Like, everything of this is like 90s extreme. The music almost and the vibe really almost feels like 90s toy commercials, right? Just like action and crazy. It's like, yeah, partying, and like it's just a crazy vibe that, like, this movie is doing, right? Mixed with, like, this melodramatic flashbacks of this story she wants to tell, right? And you're seeing these characters as they're partying, driving around town, very stylized kinds of filming, very, Dutch angles, kind of like oversaturated, kind of removed frames, so it's like looks kind of slow-mo, but like kind of choppy, kind of a stylized type of a look, but has the energy like they're selling Nerf guns, right, in the 90s. Which is insane that this movie kind of starts off in this way and has this kind of energy, right? And her ability to speak Hindi is like a constant, like, source of surprise for everybody, which is funny and is something that happens constantly in the beginning of this movie. Every new person she meets, they're all very surprised that she speaks Hindi, right? Which is thankfully, all of these criticisms I have of how this movie start completely disappear. Like, like I said, where this movie starts versus where this movie ends is in so many ways so far removed. It is amazing how this movie goes from me barely, like, making excuse after excuse to continue to watch this movie, and so thankful that I did, because where this movie goes completely took me back. It was amazing, right? I definitely liked, despite all of those things, I definitely liked some of the ideas, some of the themes. Obviously, following your dream to create a movie, dealing with people who don't have the same kind of passion for you. She decides to use her connect in India to use her friends. Like, she feels like they would perfectly work for the roles that she's trying to cast, despite the fact that they're not experienced actors, despite the fact that they don't share the passion for this project that she does. And kind of this movie dealing with how difficult it is to realize a passion when you're surrounded by people that don't share that passion for the subject or the project. You see during their party getting, or gathering being broken up, and how Western culture is polluting Indian culture, right? The sticklers, they don't like these kids acting and being embracing American culture, and how it's like they feel like it's ruining the Indian culture, and it seems like it's instantly setting up that kind of conflict of like rebellious kids versus, authority that's stuck in the past, kind of a thing, right? I love that as well, right? It's hard to have pride in a country that does so much that you disagree with. Obviously, very relatable. Just like as an American, a very relatable thing. It's hard to have pride in America when you see just having an endless list of criticisms for our country and how things go. So instantly kind of relate to that. And Aamir Khan, in many movies, he plays like kind of a rebellious character, right? Somebody who challenges the status quo, constantly questioning tradition. Three Idiots, very much about that, how he is. He approaches education and views his goals in life in a very different way than everybody else. In Dangal, where he's teaching his daughters, like bringing women into the world of wrestling in India. Like a lot of his characters are that kind of challenge, that rebellious nature. And again, right, this movie definitely kind of has that, thinking it's going to be one thing but ends up being another thing. Also, there's his fear of losing touch with his friends after college, right? As everyone goes in their different directions, right? He's been hanging on, trying to hold on to the past, sticking around for 5 years, being that Van Wilder type of a character. And also the expectations to live up to other people's expectations, whether it's the different characters, some of which, not living up to the family's religious values. There's a Muslim character who's dealing with that issue with his parents. Three Idiots has a very similar thing with the characters being worried about living up to their family's standards, their family's intentions for what they want out of their life. So I love all of the ingredients, right? I love all of the ingredients of this film's, but despite the stylistic choices, despite the insane amount of Dutch angles, despite the 90s toy commercial extreme energy, right? They're selling Mountain Dew and Doritos, right? Despite all of that stuff, I like the themes. I like those things that it's bringing up. Let's take a quick break from this episode to talk about Attention all Ray Taylor Show fans! We're excited to announce we've just released a line of exclusive merchandise featuring original artwork inspired by the show. Our high-quality shirts and biodegradable phone cases are a perfect way to show your support for the show and make a great gift for any fan. Plus, with each purchase, you'll be helping us continue to bring you great content. So don't wait. Head on over to inspireddisorder.com now and check out the full collection. Thanks for listening, and we hope you'll show your support by grabbing some Ray Taylor Show merchandise today. And now, let's get back to the show, right? And there's definitely moments of this movie that I enjoy, and I'm going to get into spoilers eventually here pretty soon, actually. But, there's definitely moments of this movie that I enjoy that are non-spoilery, I would say. There's the fun casting when she first arrives and she's starting to look for people. There's a fun casting montage. I really enjoyed that. It was something that within that kind of early vibe of this movie, I was like, okay, this is fun, right? It definitely has like that energy. Not only did they remind me of like the Bud and Doyle kind of a thing, but it did remind me of like a 90s comedy type of a vibe, late 90s, early 2000s kind of a vibe of an energy. And you saw that a lot in that montage of her trying to cast and all these different people trying to do their things to get cast for this thing. The first hour, right, is a lot of the first hour of this is just trying to get the movie cast. And then she decides to go with the friends of the Indian contact. Then there's kind of a fun montage of all of them after they've been cast in this thing, of them rehearsing, trying to figure out the costuming, and just all of them kind of bonding together, right? It kind of once everything's gets going, it's a fun type of a thing of these kids who aren't really into acting but trying to get into it, right? They want to do good for this girl, right? Obviously Aamir Khan's character also has a crush on her. Of course there's going to be love interest there. And then but these inexperienced guys trying to get into acting. So it's them getting into this thing they're not necessarily into while also bonding, right? Kind of fun, right? And then you start kind of seeing the film as it's being put together, right? The memories that she had, the flashbacks that she had that with the melodramatic music from before with her grandfather, right? We start seeing the movie as they're filming it, right? What these rebels did back in the 1920s, I think, right? And so that's fun. You start to see the movie start to kind of come together, and you start to see that story of what this thing that she's trying to put together, which I enjoy. Of these, starting to see the story, and that's telling these rebels, talking about how these rebels who want to fight the English imperialism, right? They're robbing trains, just causing havoc, because they don't want, they don't want the English to be there and doing what they did. And you get to see these kids as they learn about the story, as they learn about their history, right? They start to gain new respect for their country, or at least start to get a different perspective on it. They start to have more respect for the sacrifices that were made to get there, right? Despite not really having like pride in their country as is, through learning these characters and learning this story that they're participating in, they start to have a new appreciation for it, which, I like that as well. It's like, okay, maybe, right, this is like them learning, this is them like seeing, okay. And you hear about one of the events that are part of the rebellion that was happening. There was the Jallianwala Bagh massacre that was said to be hundreds of people, but in reality was more like 1,000 people who were massacred, right? And that was the event that really sparked the need for these kids to rebel, right? They get massacred by the English, and they're like, no, you need to get out, right? You need to let us be free. So I enjoy all that stuff as things are happening, right? As we're getting to know these kids, as they're putting the film together, they're pushing through, they're making this film against all odds. And then the movie changes. And this is where I'm going to get into spoilers, because almost 2 hours into this movie, I'm like, oh, this is a movie about these kids who are learning about their past, and they're going to have a new respect for their history, and they're going to have new respect for their country and all these things. And they're going to push, they're going to succeed in making this movie. Maybe it's going to like end up with the movie they come up with being a critical, I'm thinking of all the ways in which this movie is going to go. And then when this movie, there's an event that happens that changes, and this movie goes to completely other gear and ends up becoming a movie that I absolutely love, right? In an insane way where I'm just tolerating at the beginning the 90s extreme Nerf gun toy commercial vibe of it all, to get to the moment where things elevate to another level, and it goes from a Pauly Shore type comedy in some ways to a serious dramatic film, blew me away. And even while the change was happening, I could not expect where this movie goes. So with that said, I'm going to spoil it, because I need to get into this. I need to talk about my favorite aspects of this movie, which is all spoilers. So you have been warned. From here on out, I'm spoiling this movie. If you want to watch this movie, which I highly recommend you do, go to Netflix, Watch it. It's great, right? Go watch Rang de Basanti. Great. And if it's difficult at first, suck it up, as I did, and I guarantee by the end of this film, you will thank me. So let's get into spoilers. First off, because I'm going to be talking very positively from here on out, I want to kind of lay out some criticisms real quick. Just spoiler criticisms, right? When the film cuts away to the movie she's making, right? Like it is inconsistent, right? Because we see her grandpa in the film version of what she's making, and there's clearly no white guy being cast to do so. When it seems like we're watching the film that she's making, we're more seeing a flashback of the events, but the people that she's cast for her film are playing the people in the flashback. So a little confusing. Not a huge issue, but it's like there's a consistency issue with there. When I saw her grandfather showing up, and it's the same person from before she ever started filming it, but when they're showing these clips that have a completely different color, they're like, I don't know, like you can tell we're in a flashback or in the film. I mean, and even one of those scenes plays to them filming it. So there's a little confusion with that. A little bit of inconsistencies. The distinction between the flashbacks and her film, a little confusing, right? That aspect of it. But ultimately does not matter. Criticisms out of the way. The stuff, the film, when this film hits another level, right? When it hits the other gear, where the movie goes from just good to being great, right? This movie starts with being like, okay, all right. And then it's like, okay, this is getting good. Okay, as they're starting to make it, ooh, this is interesting. And then it hits the turn, and you're like, oh, this is a great movie, right? It's when one of the people, right, in the friend group, the friend that is part of the military, he's a pilot, just proposed to his girlfriend, who is the director's connect in India, right? Great. They've all been bonding. We get to see this guy. And he's, there's the conflict of them not being patriotic, him patriotic, him like, I'm serving the country, I'm doing this thing, and then they don't have, like, the country, what do they do for me, right? When he ends up crashing and dying, right, gave his life for his country, and then you see the defense minister blaming the accident on the pilot, right? Clearly illustrating the corrupt government that exists, right? And seeing how that is now affecting this group of people directly, right? And you see them go to do their peaceful vigil in public of this guy, this son, fiance, friend, like this person that meant so many things to so many different people, to see them do this peaceful vigil out in public, right? Showing his picture, lighting candles, kneeling down, being peaceful, paying respects, and to see the police come and break up the peaceful vigil, beating people, first off, reminded me of so much of what happened during the Black Lives Matter protests, during the George Floyd protests in America, right? Where people would go out protesting peacefully, playing music, dancing, holding signs, walking down streets, and seeing how the police would show up and just beat people with their billy clubs, pepper spray people, shoot them with rubber bullets, use tear gas, use gas that's not even allowed in warfare against the citizens of the United States. Seeing these people who are peacefully mourning the death of this person that meant so much of them and then to see the police come and to beat them all, including his mom, who ends up getting in a coma, right? That is the moment where, oh, here we go. And it's insane how, like, so much of that, like, I remember during, and it's during the pandemic too, when there was a police killing in addition to George Floyd. There's a lot of police killings in the United States. There was one that happened in Denver of this black kid who is a violinist, and he was walking somewhere in the streets. The cops murder him for no reason. They murder this kid who is a violinist. And I remember seeing on TikTok these videos of people, and I have friends in Denver. I lived in Denver for a couple years. These artists, these violinists doing a thing in a park where they're sitting. People are playing violins. People are painting murals on things. And these cops, these terrorists, break down barricades and just go and, like, eviscerate all of these people, right? Beat people, gas people, shoot them with rubber bullets. People that were mourning the death of violinists by playing violin, by creating art, and these terrorist police officers come and beat them up, right? That's what this scene in this movie, like, so much of that just was like the anger that this happens anywhere is insane. And that's where you see this movie go to another level, right? That's where you see the third act of this movie going hard, right? There's no more Nerf gun commercial vibes, right? We are in a completely different, dramatic movie, right? Seeing the people being beaten, by the cops in riot gear, like, it's just so common here, right? During the protests about police brutality, you see so many, like, thousands of clips of police officers beating peaceful protesters, beating unarmed citizens. It's just, it's absolutely disgusting. And then when you see what happens to his mom being beaten, taken to the hospital, she's in a coma, right? It's just, the entire scene is absolutely heart-wrenching. Absolutely heart-wrenching, right? And so unexpected. And what happens next is even more unexpected, right? I never thought this movie would get me emotional. Never in a million years watching this movie. Oh, a movie that reminds me of a Pauly Shore movie, a movie that has the energy of a 90s Nerf gun commercial is going to get me emotional. Well, it's how little I know, right? This movie gets me emotional, right? It's all fun and games until the third act, right? It's one of the reasons why even the long run time in Indian films, so many of them, it's so rare that they don't. So many of them, almost everyone, like 99% of them, justify their run times. And there's this great line where the woman, the Cameron Diaz vibe white chick, right, DJ, is sleeping on her lap. Like, they're all emotionally exhausted and physically battered by what happened from the police. And he's sleeping on her lap. And she says this line, maybe they aren't all sleeping. Maybe they're waking up, right? Maybe they're waking up to what her actors in her film felt, why they felt the desire to do what they did, right? Now her actors are really getting a taste. Like, I'm reviewing, doing episode recaps of the HBO show The Rehearsal, and in that moment, I couldn't help but think of how, as a director, could potentially be feeling excited about her actors tapping into the emotions that she wants them to portray in their acting of this story, right? Which maybe, I was probably taking it a few steps too far, but clearly they are. Clearly they are now relating to and can relate to the same emotions in many ways that the characters that they're trying to portray in this movie are feeling. But a great line, right? Like, they can finally understand the emotions of their characters, right? Of what it's like to fight for a cause, right? And I still think this is a movie about making a movie, right? I'm thinking like, oh, these kids are going to harness this event and they're going to be performing their asses off to make this movie so elevated, right? I still think this is a movie about making a movie, right? Like, she's going to just get epic performances out of these kids now, right? But it's more of like life imitating art, imitating life, right? The actual events in history, she inspired her to want to make this documentary, to make this piece of art that is imitating life events that happened. And now we are having the lives of these kids being in many ways inspired by the script that they've been studying. Right? So life imitating art, imitating life, where now they are wanting to imitate and are being inspired by the characters that they've been studying to perform, which is like, oh my God. Oh my God. And it even gets to a level that I didn't even expect, right? Right? Just as her documentary is imitating life, now these people, right, are inspired by those characters, and this movie goes even further than I expected. Let's take a quick break from this episode because I want to promote. Are you looking for a way to take your love of The Ray Taylor Show to the next level? Look no further than Inspired Disorder Plus. As a member, you'll get access to a whole host of amazing perks, including the full week of shows, ad-free in both audio and video versions, a live painting archive, early access to the many faces, members-only discounts and deals, a podcast back catalog with over 600 episodes. But that's not all. As a member, you'll get access to my personal blog as well as my creative writing. You'll also get the chance to ask me anything you want. With all of these benefits and more, Inspired Disorder Plus is a must-have for any fan of The Ray Taylor Show. So don't wait. Go sign up now. Head on over to inspireddisorder.com/plus and start enjoying all of the amazing perks of the membership. And now, let's get back to the show, right? It goes even further to where they want to kill the defense minister, right? After their beating, they realize the guy that blamed their friend, their fiance, their son, blamed the person they were mourning in this peaceful vigil, right? This defense minister used him as a scapegoat, knowing full well that the planes that these pilots have been given are using substandard equipment. And just as the characters they've been studying, they want to murder, to draw attention to murder this guy. So, like, the fact that they want to murder this guy is like, what? Like, it goes way farther than what I thought it would be. Right? They've all been beaten. One of theirs is dead. The pilot is dead. The mom is in a coma. Everybody is battered and bruised, right? And when they decide, they're like up on this like hilltop or a rooftop, and this movie turns into like this badass action movie, right? In a badass action movie where they're introducing the badass action characters, and it's like their image comes on. It's like, this is the Scorpion. This is the Annihilator, right? It has that kind of a scene, but it's showing like these kids as the characters that they were going to portray. Like, there's a lot of blending of the story that they were acting in and the people that the things that they start to do, right? There's definitely a blending of those two things, right? And it's crazy. And then you get like these amazing performances. This movie, cheesy 90s comedy, early 2000s comedy, has the vibe of a toy commercial from the 90s, right? Cheesy. Acting is like, it's whatever, right? There's nothing impressive about the beginning of this movie. And all of a sudden, you are getting some of the best dramatic performances from all of these kids, which obviously, you know they can act. I know they can act. I've seen Aamir Khan and stuff. I saw the other dude and stuff, you know? Joshi. And they're like, when they're discussing this, it's like serious. And it's like all of the same things that their characters were doing, but now it's like for real, right? Amazing performances. The acting just goes from like, okay, whatever, and then it jumps like 5 levels, and you're like, oh, this is like award performances. This is like amazing. Also, they have like beautiful locations where these dramatic arguments are taking place, like these hilltop views of like the city in the background, just beautiful locations. And immediately execute their plan. Execute this guy. Right? Immediately come up with the plan, boom, execute. Do it. But then it doesn't have the effect they want, because now this guy turns into a martyr. Right? It doesn't expose anything. He's just now a martyr. And then they, like the characters in the story that they were going to be acting in for this documentary that doesn't even exist anymore, right? That documentary, this is no longer a movie about making a movie. This is a movie about these kids who were going to make a movie and now are kind of following in the footsteps of the characters that they were portraying in the movie, right? And what they did in the movie was they turned themselves in, because they knew that by turning themselves in, they would be able to expose the reality. And what I thought they were doing when they were turning themselves in, they planned to turn themselves in, I thought they were turning themselves into the police, which didn't make any sense to me. I was like, if there's already a corrupt government and the police beat them, like turning yourself in, you're not going to get, they're just going to silence you. You're not going to be able to have any last words, right? But that's not what they did, which is brilliant. It's brilliant, right? Instead of going to the police department, they go to the radio station, right? And even in the radio station, things escalate pretty quick, right? They bring a gun, which obviously they have because they shot this defense minister. And things, you know, people find out they have a gun. Obviously, he gets on the radio station. He states what was happening, tells them, this is us. We did this thing. This is why we did this thing. They're taking calls. This thing goes viral, right? All these radio stations are picking it up. And of course, the government is there. They're responding, right? They're responding to this, you know, they're responding as if they're responding to a active shooter terrorist event, which these guys are just in there to tell their story. There's one gun. I guess they got some other guns, but they're not shooting. They're not killing people, right? But that's how the government's responding to them. And it's just, it's amazing that they were successful at being the spark, right? And I also love when they are being attacked. I mean, it's a sad moment, right? Because they're being assassinated now. They're being killed, right? They're being treated as if they are terrorists that are going to slaughter innocent people, which that is not what they're going to do. They killed one guy. They're confessing to that, and they have no desires to do anything, right? They're college students, right? But they're not being treated as such, so they're being picked off one by one. And I love how every time they close a door or a shutter on a window, they're always using the tiny little sliding lock to lock. It's adorable, right? It's like clearly they think that just closing a door, that sliding the little lock on the shutter is somehow going to protect these bullets from flying through and piercing their skin. But they do it. They all do it, right? Because they think, it's a nice little touch, I think. And of course, in the end, because they were able to get their message out, they become the martyrs, right? Because the reason they were taking calls, answering questions, like all the news organizations were picking up on it, they saw the reality of the situation versus how the government reacted to it, so they could see that the way the government reacted was not justified. So then now these kids become the martyr, right? They turn it, which is beautiful. And they become the spark, right? Just ignites all over the country, this movement. And there's this line that's at the beginning of the movie about her grandfather who's, running this prison that has these rebels, and he's talking about how their demeanor in walking to their death and walking to the hangman to get hung, right? And it's this line where he says, "I always believed there were two kinds of men in the world. Men who got their deaths screaming, men who go to their deaths screaming, and men who go to their deaths in silence. Then I met a third kind." And that line is played again in this movie. And in this moment, it's in relation to DJ and his friend that were in the radio station. DJ's already been shot. The friend that was on the radio spreading the word, right? They know they have moments away from being shot and killed by the police. And right as the police break into this radio's, the sound room, the recording room where they're in, the recording studio, they're laughing. Right? Like, they're not silent. They're not crying for their life. They're laughing because they knew they succeeded. They're laughing because they're kids, and they're laughing because it's just such a touching moment in this movie. And not only how this movie ends up becoming the thing that this woman wanted to make, becoming the movie that she wanted to make, it becoming a reality, but also to see how these kids react as that third type of person that reminds this guy, this confidence that they have, where it's different from normal people who are guilty, feel guilty and silent, or are fearful because they're scared of dying. And it's like this freeze frame of those two guys as they're laughing about to get gunned down, right? And at the end of the movie, it highlights how 206 MiG planes have crashed, killing 78 pilots, and how this movie was made to highlight that was a serious issue with the government knowingly putting pilots in faulty aircraft, and how that's an issue, and how in a lot of ways this movie was the way in which they made that public, made this issue a major deal. Amazing. I absolutely love this movie. It blew me away. Like, even though it completely ends in a completely different place, like the beginning was rough, the beginning was cheesy, right? Way too many Dutch angles at the start of this movie, and then to end in this epic way, to turn into this completely new thing, which is not that new. It is literally just realizing the events and a lot of the things that were the subject of her documentary that she wanted to make. It becomes the thing that she wanted to do, We see performances from these actors that are like top notch in a movie that started off cheesy. I had no idea I would end up being the same story in many ways that she was trying to tell. You know, time is a flat circle. This movie in many ways is an illustration of that, right? These young men and women, they started out making this small documentary about a time in their history that they didn't even really care about, right? And instead, they created their own movement in history. It's just insane, right? A couple great quotes. I think sometimes a person can be pushed so far that they reach a place beyond fear, right? And that's kind of where these kids were when they went into the radio station to do their thing, right? They were so past this idea of fear, and because of that, when they were dead, they were embodied that third type of person. A place where you find a strange peace. Oh, that's part of that same quote. So the full quote, I think sometimes a person can be pushed so far that they reach a place beyond fear, a place where you find a strange peace, where you free yourselves to do the right thing. That's the full quote. Love that, right? Another quote, there are only two ways to live life: tolerate things the way they are, or take responsibility to change them. A quote that their friend, the pilot, said, and a quote that DJ says at the end of the film. Just beautiful quotes, beautiful film. I absolutely love this movie. It blew me away. It blew me away. That so rarely happens, where you're watching a movie that's like mediocre at best, and then it turns into this like beautiful. It's just like, it's like the best kind of bait and switch, man. Best kind. So good. But I want to thank you all for watching this episode of The Ray Taylor Show. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on Rang D. Basanti. Don't forget to tune in every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for more movie and TV show reviews. And join the conversation by leaving a comment or rating on your favorite podcast platform, or on YouTube if you're watching this, youtube.com/Inspired Disorder. Until next time, enjoy the show.
New episodes of The Ray Taylor Show come out every single day. Subscribe on YouTube and everywhere our podcasts are found. Binge the full week over at InspiredDisorder.com/plus. Buy Ray Taylor Show merch over at InspiredDisorder.com. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!
Today is the day where you wake up and you realize that everything that you've been dreaming about, everything that you've been wanting, every goal and wish and hope that you've ever had can become real. Dreams can come true. What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.